Historic Chateau Laurier and to the audience tuning in online. A warm welcome to the 24th William G. Demas Memorial Lecture. I'm Camille Taylor. I'm Head of Corporate Communications at the Caribbean Development Bank, and it is my distinct honor to be your Master of Ceremonies this evening. Please stand for the National Anthem of Canada. Thank you. Please be seated. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the esteemed presence of our distinguished guests, the Premier of Montserrat, the Honorable Joseph Farrell, the Deputy Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Jeffrey Handley, Parliamentary Secretary of International Development, Ms. Anita van den Velde, members of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, members of the Board of Directors of the Caribbean Development Bank, our Acting President, Mr. Isaac Solomon, our Vice President, Corporate Services, Mr. Gregory Hill, or should I say Finance and Corporate Services, Mr. Gregory Hill, our Acting Vice President of Operations, Mrs. Therese Turner-Jones, Bank Secretary and General Counsel, Mrs. Diana Wilson-Patrick, other members of the CDB senior management team, and other incredible staff of the bank. And of course, heartfelt thanks to all of our special guests here and also online. We deeply appreciate each of you taking the time to join us this evening. Now, with those introductions, we've answered the who, so let's move on to the what. The William G. Demas Lecture Series is a prestigious tradition inaugurated in the year 2000, and it stands as a tribute to the Caribbean Development Bank's esteemed second president. William G. Demas was a luminary who served our region with unparalleled dedication and excellence. Throughout his illustrious career, he held several pivotal roles, such as Secretary General of CARICOM, Governor of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, and Chancellor of the University of Ghana. His leadership and vision continue to inspire. For over 2 decades, the Demas Lectures have been a beacon of thought leadership, showcasing the insights of distinguished scholars, practitioners, and professionals. These lectures cover a vast array of development issues and topics that hold immense significance and interest for our region. This year promises to uphold that tradition. Now that takes us to the why, and I will ask CDB's Chief Strategy and Accountability Officer, Ms. Onika Miller, to take over here.
Thank you, Camille. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce our speaker for the 2024 William G. Demas Memorial Lecture, Mr. Paul Barnaby Scott, who is more widely known as P.B. Scott. Mr. Scott is the CEO, Chairman, and Principal Shareholder of the Musson Group, headquartered in Jamaica. Over the past 2 decades, he has guided the transformation of the Musson Group from a Jamaican consumer wholesale business into a diversified regional conglomerate operating across 30 countries. Today, the Musson Group is a market leader in the Caribbean in various sectors, including food, pharmaceuticals, information technology, and insurance, through marquee brands such as the PBS Group, Separate Limited, and General Accident Insurance. Under his stewardship, the Musson Group has grown to over 7,000 employees with annual revenues exceeding $1.6 billion. So in addition to his very accomplished business career, Mr. Scott has made significant contributions to public service in Jamaica. He currently chairs the Development Bank of Jamaica and has led multiple efforts to divest non-strategic government assets. His exceptional service was recognized by the government of Jamaica, which awarded him the Order of Distinction in the rank of Commander Class in 2016. And more recently, in fact, just last year, he was conferred with the prestigious Order of Jamaica, recognizing his unwavering commitment to Jamaica's prosperity. His exceptional contributions to Jamaica's economic development and his outstanding leadership in the business sector. He is one of only a few individuals under the age of 50 who has received Jamaica's second highest honor. Now, alongside his professional pursuits, Mr. Scott has displayed a profound commitment to uplifting communities across the Caribbean through the Musson Foundation and the Separate Foundation. Their strategic focus areas of education, food security, and community development are vital for the region's continued progress. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please join me in welcoming to the podium an exemplary business leader, public servant, and philanthropist, P.B. Scott.
Those were very kind words, and thank you. And thank you, everyone, for having me here in Ontario. It's absolutely such a beautiful place, and I can see that the weather was brought by our fellow Caribbean people up here because it's very warm. I especially want to recognize the Premier of Montserrat, Honorable Joseph Farrell, and the Deputy Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Jeffrey Hanley, distinguished members of the CDB Board of Directors, Board of Governors, and of course, our Chair, Dr. Ahmed Hussein, for being with us, distinguished guests and others here tonight. It really is a privilege for me to be here. When I was asked to come up and do a lecture, I really was a bit concerned because I don't really do lectures. I'm more of a chatter. So please forgive me if I'm more chatting rather than lecturing. I'm clearly not qualified to lecture any of you in this room who are full of PhDs and are economists and ministers of finance and central bank governors. But what I am is a business person who operates across this region. I'm an individual that works in every market that is represented here in some shape or form. And as a result of that, I have experience and observations that I hope that perhaps I can explain some of those observations today without offending anybody, and for you to see them for what they are. Because the reality is, our region has many, many challenges. And we often don't help ourselves make it easier to navigate. And for me, that has actually been a business opportunity. For me, what I do for a living is essentially make the region easier to navigate. The more complex this region is, the better the value added that I offer to multinationals in being able to access the region. So in many ways, fixing our region's problems probably will cause some business issues for myself, but I would much prefer to be in a region that worked, functioned, and don't worry about Musson. We'll pivot. We'll move on. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself first. The title here is Economic Therapy for a Frustrated Regionalist, and I hope I don't come across as someone who's complaining, but this is an opportunity for me to let out my frustrations, and I do believe that if William Demas was here today, he also would be a kindred spirit and also an economic frustrated regionalist, someone that would want more from our region, would expect us to have been progressing further in where we wanted to get to. So who am I? Well, first and foremost, I'm a father, a husband. My 2 children, I have 2 boys, Oliver and Jacob. Oliver studying economics in Scotland, and Jacob is here tonight with me. He's at high school. I am proudly Jamaican. I'm also Bayesian. I did actually have my passport pictures up here, but I was politely told that given that we're streaming and we're in a world of sort of data protection, that was probably not the most sensible thing. So please believe me, if you were to turn those pages, you would see a picture of me in both cases. My grandfather and my mother is from Barbados, but my grandfather emigrated from Barbados to Jamaica in the 60s, 1960. So I have roots in both Barbados and Jamaica, as well as businesses right across the region. I'm proudly Jamaican. While I do have Barbados there, and I do use that to go into certain countries where they're friendlier than a Jamaican passport, I will stand here and tell you I am Team Jamaica. I'm Team Jamaica in everything that I do. I love Jamaica. Jamaica has a vibrancy, it has an energy, and it has so much potential. And while I might sound and look, I have a British accent from boarding school, but I've never had the opportunity to really, clearly I'm 6 foot, been mostly overweight most of my adult life. I can't run very fast. I certainly can't play football. So where I've had a limited opportunity to represent Jamaica has been in being the chairman of the Development Bank of Jamaica. And I think that's a role that I take very seriously. It's one of the roles that I'm very, very proud of. The work that we have done over the last 10 years in public-private partnerships, in divestments of airports, in the divestments of energy companies and other government assets, of ports. More recently, we've been looking at securitizations, etc. Has been very, very interesting, very exciting, and it's allowed me to apply my very, very narrow set of skills to help my country. And so I'm very honored and privileged to have that role, and I would obviously like to continue in that role, so I'm going to attempt not to offend anyone this evening. So this is Musson. This is Musson circa about 1870. This is the company that I'm chairman and CEO of. Now, for those people from the region, particularly if you're from Barbados, you would recognize this as the Carinage in Bridgetown. And that is the original SP Musson building. The building, the company was started in 1820. It's one of the oldest companies in the region. And I'm the chairman and CEO of that company. And we operate, as was described earlier, in about 30 countries. We have 7,000 employees. And we weren't always in 30 countries. I mean, it's been a 25-year journey, and we originally were just in Jamaica. But we've built a distribution, a platform, which allows people to access multiple countries seamlessly by integrating into what we do. And that is something that I think adds a lot of value, because every country that we operate in doesn't have scale. They're small. They also have idiosyncrasies and rules that apply to that country and not to many of the other countries in our region. And as a result of that, it's very complicated for international investors, for people like Mondelez or Pfizer or multinationals to get their head around how do they get their product to the end user. And what we do is we simplicate that. We make that easier. And we are a platform for them to plug into so they can distribute their products. So this is our company. Seprod. Seprod is a listed food business. We're the largest food manufacturer in the Caribbean. We do vegetable oil, flour, rice. We also do margarine and other products, and milk. General Accident, which is on the right-hand side there, we're the largest insurance company in Jamaica for general insurance, and we also write business throughout the Caribbean. And then our other large company is Productive Business Solutions. And Productive Business Solutions is an IT company, and it has 3,000 IT professionals operating in Central America and the Caribbean. And what we do is we invest in digitalization programs and bringing IT and technology to our region. And these are some of the brands that we represent. And we work in basically three strategies. Food and healthcare, which is food products. So you'll recognize these brands: Mondelez, Cadbury's chocolates, Goya, Kraft, Ovaltine biscuits. Pharmaceutical products: Pfizer, Roche, Boehringer. And these are products that sit on our platform, and we distribute them in every country in the Caribbean. And then we have an IT business, and the IT business, Productive Business Solutions, represents Google, Cisco, Xerox. In fact, we're the largest Xerox distributor in the world, and we represent Xerox in Central America, Caribbean, Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. And on top of that business, we also represent Google and Cisco and Oracle, and we bring North American technology effectively and integrate and distribute it and put it into our markets. That business, I think, is the fastest growing business that we have. We started it in 2000, and it obviously has had the wind in its sails. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, because one of the things that is incredibly important in our region is investing in technology. Because only by investing in technology can you deliver the efficiencies that we need to have to overcome our lack of scale. In addition to that, we also have significant labor issues in our markets. And we can't get away from that fact. The reality is Canada, which is a beautiful country and is so opening to immigrants, which is such a wonderful thing and such a magical thing, and it's such an embracing thing. And in a world where immigrants are often discussed, for example, like in the British election right now, in a way that's negative, immigrants are the economic engine of any economy. Any economy. Wherever you look at Miami, where 90% of the people in Miami were not even born in the United States. Or you look at the fastest growing cities in the United States, most of them are people that didn't live there 5 years ago. And the reality is that the US and also Canada absorb a significant amount of our capacity and capable people. So in fact, somewhere between 60 and 70% of our graduates in our region emigrate within 2 years of graduation. Now, if you think about that, if a country like Jamaica, where we spend a lot of our taxpayers' money on subsidized or free education, all the way up to basically the tertiary level, and then we do not get the benefit of that education, that productivity, because it leaves within 2 years. Yet there's no compensating factor for that. Now, hopefully, that comes in the form of benefits to the Caribbean Development Bank in some shape or form, because we are giving a lot of labor and a lot of capacity to the first world countries. But it is a big, big challenge for us. And the only way to overcome capacity and capability is either to replace it by bringing it in yourself, or investing ferociously in education, so that if 7 in 1,000 leave, as they do in Jamaica, you're more than replacing that. Or we invest in technology and try and improve the productivity of what we have. The problem is, when you invest in technology, you need capable people to manage the technology. Otherwise, the technology is not very useful. It's a tool that can't be utilized. So our region is most definitely has a number of significant challenges. And I hope maybe I can show you some observations that I've observed throughout the last sort of 10 years working on it. So these are the areas where we have facilities, operations, and employees. And as you can see, we cover the entire region. And this is our region. And when you look at it, we're really an archipelago of islands, plus Guyana. And we were really not really supposed to become independent as many, many individual islands. Jamaica decided to break away from the Federation and create Jamaica. But what is Jamaica? Jamaica's an island. And we've effectively, and I'm proud to call myself Jamaican, but I also have to live in reality that I'm calling myself Jamaican, which is a nationality that really and truly did not really exist pre-independence. So my nationality is only 60 years old. And I'm identifying it, and we reinforce it. We have our own national anthem that we developed in the 1960s, and we go to the cinema, and every time we go in the cinema, we have to stand up for the national anthem, and all the children learn the national anthem. It's the first thing they learn, and then we learn all the heroes, national heroes, Nanny of the Maroons and everything, and we reinforce and we reinforce and we reinforce. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm very proud to call myself Jamaican. I'm very proud that Usain Bolt is one of the best runners of all time. I'm very proud that we have phenomenal music that comes from Jamaica, and we can identify and bring that back and relate to it. There's no doubt about that. Bob Marley, Sean Paul, many others. I'm very proud of that. But being proud doesn't make you wealthy. Being proud, I'm not sure how practical that is. And what we have to do is find a balance where we can relate to our identity and also strive for scale. Because we don't have scale, and we're 3 million people. I don't want to offend anyone here, but there are countries that have significantly less than 3 million people who are members of the Caribbean Development Bank. There are countries that can fit in Sabina Park if they choose to. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not suggesting it is. What I'm suggesting is that lack of scale means that the cost of operating your government is going to be significantly higher as a percentage of your GDP simply by the fact that if you're going to have a Ministry of Health, a Ministry of Security, a Ministry of Justice, a whole court system, a whole police system, a whole port system, a customs department for a country of 70,000 people, which is a population of the size of Stony Hill outside of Kingston or Port Antonio, the likelihood is you're going to have to fund that. Now that is going to mean either overtaxing your citizens in order to fund it, which is going to have problems for the private sector and economic growth, or you're going to have to end up indebted. And we in the region have had a problem. Now, with the exception, of Guyana, obviously, but generally, we've had very high debt to GDP. Jamaica, my country, had a debt to GDP of 148%. And at that level, you can't invest in services, you can't invest in education, you can't invest in police, you can't invest in health, you can't invest in anything. And what's worse is the private sector can't invest because the government crowds out completely the debt capacity of the market, because all the money is going to the government to fund just the government functioning, and the private sector has no capacity to develop either. Now, this is where we are, and at the end of the day, the good news is that we don't have to live where we are forever. The same way we have lived in an environment where we have complicated things, we can make things simpler. We can uncomplicate things. And the same way that we've made mistakes in our markets, etc., and spent money and haven't been efficient and run up a big debt, we can not do that going forward. And I think Jamaica is a phenomenal example of that. Jamaica hit a debt to GDP, which is not on this slide, of 148, made a decision to focus, to absolutely focus on the task in hand. It created EPOC, it worked with the IMF, it had that external discipline, it made some very, very tough decisions. Very tough decisions. And if our minister was here, I see an empty seat there with his name on it, I would be congratulating him, because he's been a significant player, as was his predecessor, and the predecessor before that, Dr. Peter Phillips, who were very, very consistent in their fiscal discipline, which is not an easy thing to do. But as a result of that, today, our debt to GDP is 70%. That has created a lot of space, a lot of activity in the private sector. And that's great. So the government can now invest. It now has the capacity to do certain things. It's not where we want it to be, but it can do that. In order for us to really grow and develop, we can't just have fiscal space to invest. We really need people to implement the projects that the fiscal space gives us to spend on. So we can't afford for our best people to disappear. Otherwise, every time we get money that we decide we're going to invest in a roadworks, and we think that it's going to take 1 year, and it takes 3 years. And we ask, why does it take 3 years? Well, because we don't have enough engineers. The supervisors turn up at 10, not at 8 o'clock in the morning. We don't do work at night. So we just do it during the day, which causes traffic jams and all these sort of things. And all that comes back down to the lack of supervisory management, because it's in North America. That's where it is. And by the way, that's not a unique thing in Jamaica. That exists for Guyana. Our whole diaspora. That's why our diaspora is so strong. It's so important. That's why I was yesterday in Toronto looking around stores at our products on the shelves. Because we sell a lot of our products in Canada, in the northeast of the United States. And it is as equally an important market now to us as Jamaica is. In fact, we sell more in North America of Suppligen, the brand Suppligen, than we sell in the rest of the Caribbean, with the exception of Trinidad and Jamaica. That's how important that market is for us. But that's because people have been moving up there. Our capacity is moving up there. Our capability is moving up there. So we have to effectively try and work through that. And I have a slide here because I wanted to show you some examples of just bad policy. And in many ways, I know this is recorded, so I have to be careful what I'm saying, and I am sorry that the minister is not here, but this is not his responsibility. But I have chosen a couple of areas of where there are policies that exist in Jamaica, but also exist throughout CARICOM in other markets. But I'm going to use the Jamaican market as an example. And I believe when you think about it and you think about your own markets, you're going to think about the same thing. Because we have to really look at productivity in our region. We have to look at what makes us productive. And so often in our markets, we overcomplicate things. We have a regional Caribbean market. Well, is it really free movement of goods in the Caribbean? We have Article 146. Does that really make flour from Jamaica can't go into St. Lucia without a tariff, but flour from St. Lucia can go to Barbados without a tariff and compete with the flour from Jamaica? How is that? That's complicated, it's messy, and it's definitely not a regional free market, right? So let's call a spade a spade. And what are we doing? We're protecting one or two people in markets at the expense of the general population. In Barbados, the cost of protein per pound of chicken is 3 times the cost of what it is in the supermarket in Florida. But the individual in Barbados earns half the amount of an average person in Florida, maybe even less than half the amount. And that's protecting one chicken producer that probably employs 30 people. I don't know. I will probably get emailed after this and harassed by that. But this is common everywhere. If you look at a situation, the flour situation I just spoke about, I can tell you in my own flour mill, I have 30 people. My own flour mill can produce all the flour the OECS would ever need in a second night shift, because it can produce 50% of Jamaica on one shift. And I could produce flour 25% cheaper than the flour that is being sold and protected there. So who is that helping? It's helping the person who owns the flour mill there, and maybe the 30 employees. But how many people are having to pay more money for flour? In Jamaica, we have supposedly a CARICOM free market, but can you import sugar from Belize or Guyana to Jamaica? No, because you have to have a sugar license to import sugar. Well, how does that make sense? And guess what? We're protecting 2 factories. We used to have 30. We only have 2 now. That Sugar Control Act was put in place in 1971. We have 3 million people that are paying 2.5 times the price per ton for sugar every single day to the world market. Poor people. To protect 2 factories. I am a distributor for those factories, so I'm talking against myself here. It's not in my interest for that to be changed. But does it make sense for 3 million people to be paying 2.5 times more for sugar? Probably in 1971, when there were 30 factories and 300,000 people in the industry. Not in 2024, where there's probably less than 1,500 people in the industry. That's one hotel's amount of employees could absorb all of that. One BPO center could absorb all of that. At DBJ, when Petrocaribe set up the Petrocaribe BPO fund. We targeted and built BPO and created 60,000 jobs in BPO. No protection. There was no protection. There's no protection for the BPO industry. But the jobs were created, and one BPO facility could absorb the entire sugar industry in Jamaica. And guess what? If they did that, 3 million people could get sugar cheaper every day. But we are sort of half in. We're half capitalists in our region. We're not full capitalists. We don't lean in. We don't like to mess up something that has been as it has been. But if we want to make real change, we want to have real economic growth, we have to have hard conversations and address some of these issues, because they're not going away and they're structural and they just don't make sense. Not everyone can produce chicken. You don't need a chicken factory and a chicken industry in every island in the Caribbean. We don't need a rice industry in every island in the Caribbean. Guyana can produce our rice, Belize and Guyana can produce our sugar, and Jamaica can produce the sugar too. But make it a level playing field and a free market. The price of chicken will drop, the price of sugar will drop. And do you know what, ministers, who are ministers of finance and central bankers? Every single one of you have been thinking about inflation over the last 2 years, worried about inflation. And every single one of you, all you think about is the demand side and interest rates. And I understand that vis-a-vis exchange rates in the US. But what about the supply side? If you look in a basket of goods that makes up the inflationary index, you have protein. You have all these products and they're all weighted. But have you ever sat down and said, all right, let's just try and make every single thing in this basket cheaper? What are the impediments to doing that? So why are we going to just put interest rates up? That's just a crude tool. And at the end of the day, it just stalls our economy. Now, I'm not saying don't do that because you have other factors. You do have to concern yourself with the exchange rate and all those sort of things. I agree. But it's almost like there's only the demand side. We forget the supply side, totally. And the supply side is incredibly important if you want to manage your inflation, you want to deliver real improvements to the everyday person's life, not to the few people that are benefiting because they're the owners of capital. And this is it's kind of ironic because these policies are coming from some sort of socialist base that's kind of just protecting an elite and definitely not delivering the outcome that's desired. But at the same time, we can't just throw the babies out with the bathwater, because at the end of the day, agriculture is an important industry. It's important for all of us. It's important for Guyana, for rice. It'll be more important in the future because they have a lot of land. You can get cheap electricity. You'll be able to pump water because you have lots of water across the flatlands. It will be the sort of breadbasket for the region. It's going to be so prosperous, so exciting even to talk about it. It's just incredible. Jamaica also has beautiful mountains. We can grow coffee and we can also do a lot of things. But there are certain laws that are in place in our region that we have to address to improve the productivity. I'm going to give you an example. You see that cow that's on your screen? It's not a special cow, but it's one of 6,000 cows that we have on our farm in Jamaica. We produce that milk, surge milk. We also contract pack for Nestle and other people, and we export throughout the region. Now, I'm not a big fan of cows. I don't like cows. I think they're unpredictable. You expect a farm to produce X amount in a month. It rains, the cows get distressed because of wind, or it's too hot and they sweat and they produce less because of sweat. But basically a cow is a machine that converts grass and water to milk that we can then package and sell. That's what it is. And that's kind of what you got to think about it as, right? Now, the problem with that cow, it only produces 11 liters of milk a day. it's not a very productive cow. But let me tell you, you compare that cow to some of your cows across the region, it's producing twice as much. Because some of your cows are producing half of that. Now let's put this in context. New Zealand, the same cow is producing 35 liters a day, that my cow is producing 11 liters. Now, it's not that the New Zealand cow is the Usain Bolt of cows, but what it is the genetics is much improved. And also the weather in New Zealand is better. But it's not the weather alone, because there are cows in Honduras that are producing 20 liters, and Honduras has the same tropical weather that we have. Now, what is the difference? The difference is genetics. You need to manage the genetics of the cow in order to be able to improve, because a cow, you have to manage it. The longer it walks, the more it sweats. The more it sweats, the less water it has. The less water it has, the less milk it has, right? So there's a whole sort of method behind it. But ultimately, the genetics of the cow will help produce a better yielding cow. In Jamaica, we have an act that was put through Parliament in the 1890s. The 1890s. It's called the Cattle Control Act. Now, this act still exists today. And this act stops us from bringing in cows from any country in the world without approval of the veterinarian department of the government. Well, that kind of sounds sensible, except our veterinarian department has never approved anyone bringing in any cows, ever. Ever. And you can ask them nicely, you can write them 100 times, it doesn't get approved. Our veterinarian department also doesn't allow us to bring in sperm from certain countries. I can't bring in sperm from Brazil because there's foot and mouth in Brazil. Now, Brazil, it's a huge country, and the foot and mouth could be in the south of Brazil. How does anyone know if the foot and mouth is affecting my sperm? And the sperm is not going to affect foot and mouth. The sperm is the sperm. It's a different thing. But this is a problem. Because ultimately, the cost of milk on the shelf is more expensive because I'm producing 11 liters instead of 20 liters. And had I been able to deal with the genetics, I could produce 20 liters, reduce the cost on the shelf. I could also sell more, export more, and we could have a very vibrant industry in the country. But that is poor policy. And there's lots of that in our region. If you want to bring cows or milk into any of our countries, you too, look, I bet you have a Cattle Control Act, because they were, in essence, brought from colonial times and replicated. And we're not in colonial times now. We're in 2024, and I want my cows to produce 22 liters of milk. This, I keep pointing to the screen now, but it's up there. This island is off Jamaica. It's about 100 miles south of Jamaica. We have a set of islands called the Pedro Keys, and they are beautiful, beautiful. Not many people know about them because they're full of people living on them that essentially, I would say that it's the nearest thing that you would find to Port Royal circa 1640 or so. Middle Key has about 300 fishermen in it, and they live there and they fish conch and fish, etc. But if you dive on this anywhere on the Pedro Keys, the floor moves. It's moving. There is so much shellfish, lobsters, conch, that it's just ridiculous. It's a feast. And you come up, and all you will see is foreign boats fishing our fish and our crustaceans, and our lobsters. If you look to the right there, there's a sort of pile of what looks like rocks. That's a 60-foot high pile of conch shells. People just picking conch, peeling out the conch, freezing it, selling it. That's just on the island. Jamaica does not even export 10 million US dollars worth of seafood. Not even 10 million US dollars. All the lobsters, the conch, it goes off to Honduras and other markets where they process it. Why? The same Cattle Control Act of 1890. It does not allow, because it defines animals with legs. A lobster has legs. It requires a vet to inspect every animal that comes onto the shore of the country. As a result of that, the fishermen and the people that are in that business, even Jamaicans who are in that business, they take their catch and they process it in Honduras. And it becomes part of Honduras's exports. We don't tax it. Not that we have the money to police it, but it's the same act, the Cattle Control Act. That's bad policy, and it's destroying productivity. Now, this is a little sadder, but it's another example of incredibly poor policy, and it's an example of where I really believe cooperation, delivering scale across our region, can really improve outcomes for our people. The FDA in the United States has a budget of 7.2 billion US dollars. That agency effectively monitors and approves the use of drugs in the United States. In Jamaica, and by the way, in every single little island that we have decided that we are qualified, just like the $7.2 billion organization in the United States, to approve drugs ourselves. Because, we apparently have a few pharmacists and they're capable of doing this, right? So what does that mean? That means, and I'm talking against myself again, because I'm the representative for Roche, and I sell that drug, Herceptin. That's a breast cancer drug. I sell that drug every year through the government tenders. And every year, I sell a lot of it. A lot of it. But I'm selling the equivalent of a Toyota 1985 breast cancer drug when I could be selling a Tesla. And do you know why? Because in Jamaica, we have one person in the Ministry of Health, one person who's approving and going through the dossiers to approve new drugs. One person. We had two, and one left. Then we brought back a retired pharmacist, and we now have one. That means it takes 4 years to register new drugs in Jamaica. 4 years. And by the way, let me tell you something. I sell drugs throughout the Caribbean, and pretty much every single market, the waiting list to register drugs is quite extensive. The one exception is Barbados. Barbados decided, very sensibly, that if it's registered by the FDA and approved, if it's good enough for the FDA, it's good enough for Barbados. They have no problem, no waiting list for any FDA-approved drugs. But we have allowed our desire, our identity, our sovereignty to sort of become very impractical. It has actually superseded real outcomes for our people. The fact that we're saying we are Jamaican and we must be able to approve our own drugs to go into our own people, but we clearly don't have the resources to do so, results in bad patient outcomes for our people and an inability for us to bring in the new drug, which is fiscal, which takes minutes to implement opposed to hours. And the patient outcomes are far, far better. Now, when we talk about cooperation and trying to make changes in the region, these are the sort of things that if it is that we must have some national, sort of regional pride, then we need to make sure it's resourced. And maybe we do it regionally, perhaps. Or maybe we all just say if it's FDA approved, we just accept it and we move on. But in every single country, with the exception of Barbados, this is an issue. This is a real issue. And when we think about things, why do people leave? It's little things like this. Healthcare matters. If you can't get the right healthcare in Jamaica, and you get it in Florida, at the end of the day, you're talking life and death. It matters. This is another example of bad policy. And the good thing is, we can change this. But just like with the debt, we need to wake up in the morning and decide we need to change it. But this is regional. This is not just a Jamaican problem. This is a finance issue now. Another regional issue. And I'm not saying under any circumstances Lloyd's of London is bad. My son, who is working in London right now, is working in a Lloyd's brokerage. Lloyd's are the biggest market that we ourselves place most of our insurance with. So please don't get that I'm suggesting in any shape or form Lloyd's of London is negative. However, in almost every single market in the Caribbean, Lloyd's of London is registered as if it's an insurance company. And it's not. It's an insurance market. It's an association of people that partake in the insurance industry. But this is a legacy policy from colonialism where we didn't have any domestic insurance companies. So Lloyd's became registered. But we never deregistered Lloyd's. And this causes problems because, oh, thank you, because it undermines the regulator. How can the regulator regulate a company that doesn't really exist? You can't have the beneficial owner of Lloyd's. The stuff that we have to fill out as insurance operators, we fill them out, but this other company doesn't have to do that. So, and this exists in almost every one of our markets. The second issue is, one of our biggest challenges in our region is climate. We are having more storms today than we were 20 years ago, 40 years ago. And if you look at weather, and the weather, it's the number of storms just is continuing, is predicted to continue to increase. Some people say this is because actually, strangely enough, it's because of the removal of pollution is removing the coverage and it's heating up the water quicker. And on the Pacific side, they're getting less storms because there's been an increase in pollution. But people say a lot of different things. I'm not going to argue with scientists, but what I do know is that we are all vulnerable to climate change in the Caribbean. That is without a doubt. We are at the receiving end of these storms. Therefore, insurance is an incredibly important product because if a storm comes through and you cannot rebuild because you don't have insurance, it's not 1 year you've lost, it's decades. It's going to take decades to build back hotels, decades to build back the roads. So it's very important to have it. Now, Lloyd's is an important market, but it's not the only market. And the global market of insurance requires certain pricing in order for us to be able to get coverage. The fact that Lloyd's is registered as an insurance company in every single market means that it dips into the market and lowers the rates constantly, which allows effectively the other players to use it as an excuse on renewal that they don't want to give more capacity to the Caribbean because the rates are too low. So we have to be thoughtful on how we do things. We have to be consistent and how we apply regulation. And when you have regulation that just doesn't apply to some but applies to everyone else, it undermines the credibility of the regulator. And this is almost prevalent in every Caribbean island. I want to talk a little bit about another issue that we have in the Caribbean. And today, actually, the bottom slide changed because NVIDIA became the most valuable company in the world. It moved from $2 billion at the beginning of the year to 3.4 now. So if you're a lucky NVIDIA stockholder, congratulations. That's good for you. But what this really shows you over the last 24 years, if you look at the most valuable companies in the world, in 2001, number 5 was Walmart, obviously a grocer, Citibank, a financial firm, Exxon, an oil company, Microsoft, a tech company, and GE, one tech company, number 2. In 2006, there was one tech company, the same Microsoft, it was number 4. 2011, Apple was number 2. But from 2016, every year since 2016 to today, the top 5 have all been tech companies. Every single one of them. And that shows you, because where private capital is going, that's the leading edge to where productivity is and what's happening in the economy. Let's look at the top 10 biggest companies in Jamaica. We have a financial services company, Sagicor. Massey Holdings, it's a retail conglomerate. NCB, a bank. Scotia, a bank, a Canadian bank. Barita, a stockbroker. Guardian Holdings, a financial holding company with insurance operations. Wisynco, a beverage manufacturer. Grace Kennedy, a conglomerate with retail and food distribution, manufacturing. Pan Jamaica Group, whose biggest asset is actually Sagicor, but they're also in terminals, logistics, and juices. And Supreme Ventures, which is a lottery company. No technology companies there whatsoever, not one. No money is going from our pension funds into developing and implementing productivity change and digitalization and all the things that we need to do. Let's look at Trinidad. The number 1 is Republic Bank. First Citizens, another bank. Scotia Bank, another great Canadian institution. First Caribbean, which is CIBC, another Canadian institution. Ansa McCall, a brewery, a distribution company, a bank. Massey Holdings, the same company, it's cross-listed on the Jamaican Stock Exchange. Agostini, a distribution company. Angostura, a liquor company, you might have heard of Angostura Bitters. Guardian Holdings, which is an insurance company, and Ansa Merchant Bank, which is part of Ansa McCall. It's obviously a merchant bank. But that is very different from this. Very different. And we wonder why our productivity is different. Our productivity is also very, very different. But we are trying in our group to build an IT company because, and I don't want this to come across like some sort of cheap advert for PBS, which of course it is, but I really wanted to just show you some of the projects that our company is doing in digitalization in government in Central America, which is very different to some of the projects that we're doing in the Caribbean. Because if we are to create capacity, we have to invest in technology to be able to do things and deliver in a more efficient way. So this is PBS, our company, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about some of the projects.
PBS Now. Technology can't wait. PBS Group, a journey of solidarity and innovation at PBS Group. Get ready for an inspiring journey. Today, we will explore the incredible initiatives of PBS Group that transform lives and societies through technology and social commitment.
First stop, Guatemala. In Guatemala, PBS partners with public schools to provide vocational workshops to students. Topics such as marketing, personal finance, and technology help them make informed decisions about their professional future. In addition, the Aula 1.0 y 2.0 project brings technology to the classroom, training over 20,000 teachers and benefiting thousands of schools. Quality education is within everyone's reach.
Second stop, Trinidad and Tobago. At PBS, security is essential. That is why PBS Trinidad and Tobago forged an alliance to work alongside BPTT to ensure preventive maintenance and repairs of the 10 offshore platforms under our care. Networking services in a secure environment.
Third stop, Nicaragua. PBS Nicaragua is revolutionizing healthcare. Thanks to technology, doctors in remote hospitals can access more accurate diagnosis. This translates into a better quality of life for the population and a more efficient healthcare system. Technology at the service of health.
Fourth stop, Jamaica. PBS drives innovation in the traffic ticketing system, making it faster and more accurate. Goodbye to slow processes and human errors. Technology for a safer city.
Fifth stop, El Salvador. In El Salvador, PBS joins UNICEF to deliver computers to over 1 million students. In addition, thanks to their partnership with the Ministry of Education, millions of books were printed to foster a love for reading. Investing in education is investing in the future.
Sixth stop, Dominican Republic. PBS Dominican Republic equips Punta Cana International Airport with state-of-the-art equipment for the detection of explosive devices. Airport security is strengthened for a smoother travel experience. Travel with confidence.
Seventh stop, Costa Rica. Costa Rica takes a leap towards custom modernization with the Integrated Customs Management System. PBS, in consortium with Web Fontaine, implements this technology that will streamline trade and increase efficiency. Digital customs for smoother trade.
Eighth stop, Honduras. PBS Honduras undertakes the titanic task of digitizing 17 million documents from the Honduran Health Regulatory Agency, ARSA. In addition, its social responsibility project will benefit children with cerebral palsy, providing them with therapy using innovative technology. Social commitment that transforms lives.
Ninth stop, Guyana. Guyana equips 6 practical instruction centers with cutting-edge technology, thanks to a contract with PBS. These centers prepare young people for the job market, offering them quality training in various areas. Skilled youth, promising future.
10th stop, Barbados. PBS Barbados delivers the new National Digital Identity Document to the population. This smart card provides greater security and functionality to its citizens. Additionally, PBS equips the Barbados Police with body-worn cameras to promote transparency and law enforcement. Citizen security, everyone's commitment.
This journey shows us PBS Group's deep commitment to society. Through technological innovation and teamwork, PBS contributes to a more prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable future for all.
Discipline, transparency, accountability, and urgency.
PBS Now. Technology can't wait.
Yeah, so the first half of that was a lot of pictures of me and really not much use to that. But the second half, you can really see some of the products that we're doing in some of the countries. And there is a big difference between the level of investment in Central America, in digitalization, in systems, in customs core, even in Dominican Republic and other countries, to what we're really doing in the Caribbean. The governments of the Caribbean have yet to really invest in technology transformation. And I think that is something that we must address. And it's not something that can wait. I know it's a cheesy tagline, technology can't wait. But the rest of the world is moving ahead at a very fast pace, and we have to get with it. We have to get with it. If we don't get with it, our productivity is going to continue to lag. And it's a big problem. And it's a big problem for a number of reasons. If you look at this, and forgive my cut and paste, but the populations of Central America have developed very nicely over the last 20 years. Guatemala, it's 11.5 to 17, and it will soon be 20 million people. If you even look at the most conservative country in Central America, Costa Rica, it's gone from 4 million to 5.1. We have a major problem in the Caribbean, a major problem, and we have to address it. And we have to be open and consider options that are going to happen whether we like it or not. Because at the end of the day, we've been spending, even with the revised signing of the treaty, 30 years trying to get free movement of labor working. Yet while we're trying to negotiate and to get free movement of labor working, 120,000 Venezuelans exist in Trinidad. I mean, I have a rice mill in Ghana, and I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for this, but if you turn up there, and I will be there next week, you turn up there, I would say 2/3 of the team there are from Venezuela. They're not from Ghana. And we're not displacing people because there's plenty of jobs in Ghana. In reality, in every market that we operate in the Caribbean, we have a significant labor shortage. And we have to address it. It's not going to go away. It has to be addressed. And it can be addressed through education, improving productivity. It can be addressed by replacing people that emigrate with immigrants. There's nothing wrong with foreign people coming and living in our countries. We have to get over that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually really strange that culturally we get excited about being immigrants. We're happy to be immigrants, but we don't want immigrants. But we don't also want to be poor. But we don't put the two things together. And we have to start accepting that productivity doesn't just drop from the sky. It actually comes from people. People are the most important component of an economy. Our population in Jamaica, our birth rate is halved since 1971. We have a death rate of 8 in 1,000. We have a migration rate of 7 in 1,000. That means 15 people are in 1,000 disappearing, right? Just not there anymore. And our birth rate is 14.8. So we're stagnant. Our population's not going to grow. So that's one problem. But think about this. We're replacing consumers and productive capacity with babies who can't consume, and they can't drive a tractor or run a packaging plant. They're babies. That's what we're doing. We are going to become less capable every single year, regardless of what we do, because we can't stop people from migrating. And quite honestly, why would we want to destroy the dreams of people wanting better for themselves and their family? I think it's wonderful. I think it's the most magical thing for people to go and develop a new life and improve things for their family. I would love for people to be able to wake up and believe that that's possible in Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean, in our region. But we have to be real. It's not always possible for everyone. So we need to be able to deliver scale in our region, because you can only invest in certain things like technology with scale. We need to bring technology to education, technology to government deliveries of service to make it more efficient. And we need to seriously consider, and I know people don't like the word, and it's strange, we need to consider how we attract people to our region. You know, we spend our entire lives in Barbados, Jamaica, and in the private sector, etc., talking about how do we attract people to come and visit us? How do we attract people? We're okay with people coming for a week and lying on our beach. We're cool with that. But we need engineers. We need management capability. We need capacity as a country in order to drive productivity. And as a region, we have so much opportunity to cooperate. Because if you think about it, there's so many things. I've shown you some areas like drug regulations. Why should we have 15 or 16 different drug regulation environments? Why don't we, if we need to have a regional one because we're so different from everybody else, why don't we have a Caribbean one? And we resource it. Make it work. If we think identity is important to us, let's have that together. It's better than having 14 deficient ones and people not being able to register drugs and having breast cancer drugs that are 15 years out of date. Civil aviation, think about this. How ridiculous is it that all of us are islands, with the exception of Guyana, but you have airspace, and we must have civil aviation authorities for every single country? You know how much that costs? And by the way, if you don't have one, you're losing revenue because you should be charging for every airplane going through your sky. Why don't we have a regional one where we invest in technology regionally, collect the money, and share it out? Customs. We have common external tariffs that are exactly the same. We have a CET, the CARICOM common external tariff. We have a customs book that has the same customs code in every single country. It's the same book. Yet, in every country, we interpret things differently. This may be AB1 on the code, but we say it's AB1, and actually it's in bits or whatever, and we apply a different tariff rate to it. You know how much revenue we lose through customs because we don't have harmonious tariff application? Do you know how complicated it makes operating in the region when you produce a product and you think it's going to be one way and it's another way, or you import a product? It's very complicated. Part of the reason we have corruption, or perceived corruption in customs, is because it's very localized. People went to school with the smugglers. Let's be honest. Why can't we have a regional customs force that moves around, that eliminates that, and delivers scale, that can invest in the very best technology, that every container gets scanned for narco product and anything that's counterfeit, any bad product? We can invest in technology to achieve that. It just costs money and organization, but it can be done. We just need to want to do it. Our judicial system, sure, we're working on that. Some of us have a Caribbean Court of Appeal, some of us don't. Maybe one day we will. I think it's just absolutely ridiculous, personally, it's a personal, that we don't believe that we have the capability to manage our our own judicial systems, and that we still have to go all the way to the House of Lords. I think that says a lot about our own view of ourselves and our society, and I hope that that changes going forward, and we can get the cooperation there, because that is somewhere we should be able to get cooperation, and it is somewhere where we should be able to get scale. Regulatory frameworks. Think about it. Every country has a central bank or a regulatory institution that has to hire actuaries. In Jamaica, we have one, the FSC. We also have the Bank of Jamaica. I'm a regulated entity, so I'm not going to be too rude about them. But the reality is, they're restricted in employing people based upon the government wage restrictions. So when you think about it, you need an actuary. Actuaries are not cheap. Actuaries take a long time to become an actuary. You have to go to university for a very long time, and you have to be fairly smart. What type of actuary do you get for the type of money you're allowed to pay within government? There are lots of things that we can do through technology to harmonize regulation throughout the region. When you look back on that stock exchange capitalization, so a lot of companies are cross-listed. Why do we need to have regulatory bodies in every single country? Why can't we have a method where we have common regulations and look to one body that has credibility and has teeth and can have the resources to manage things effectively? Free movement of labor and capital. You know, you're a lawyer, you still go to UE, you still have to, you call to the bar in Jamaica, you still have to get called to the bar in Barbados. Like in all the different islands. We don't have free movement of professional services in the Caribbean. We need it. We need to be able to have that. If you want free movement of goods, you need free movement of people. And we have a lot. I mean, my company, we have investments in every island. But do you know what? You know what gives you the confidence to invest more? It's knowing that when there's a problem, you can just send your people to fix it. And it's not a problem. And they shouldn't have to justify being in a country when they're trying to sort out a problem that ends benefiting that country. So I think we can create scale the same way we have taken away our own scale. We just need to make it matter. We need to consider it important. And in the same way that Jamaica took fiscal discipline to task and decided this is important, we need to get this done. We need to do that in our region. Otherwise, we're not going to, unless, of course, you discover something that changes everything, such as in Guyana. If we don't have that benefit, then we really are not going to be improving. So cooperation together delivers scale and capacity. And the better coordinated we are, and that's why CDB is so important. And it's so important that you're able to intertwine programs together and hopefully can take on some of these issues and fund with focus to make changes, because the region has so much potential. We have so much potential, but it has very limited potential unless we harness our productivity and our capacity. And to do that, we need to be very human-centric, and we also need to have technology development and investment. So thank you very much. I hope I wasn't too lecturous. And
And we're inviting our president, our acting president, Mr. Isaac Solomon, to make a presentation to our guest speaker. So, very near and dear to Mr. Scott's heart are two charitable institutions. The Musson Group has the Musson's Foundation and the Seprod Foundation. And interestingly, they're involved in cultural development and creative industries, youth development, leadership training, community development, all causes that align perfectly with our mandate. So in the spirit of Partnerships for Resilient Prosperity, we will be supporting both foundations. And so we're asking Isaac to just make a symbolic presentation as a mark of this partnership. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so we had set aside some time for Q&A. So I will take one question from the floor, and then I'm going to turn Mr. Scott over to a grilling during the cocktail that will follow afterwards, so we can actually ask him questions at our leisure. And I see our Chief Risk Officer, Stefano Capodilio, has his hand raised. Stefano, could you please step to the microphone?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation and insightful experience from your life every day. I have a question that basically I try to look at, you said, cooperation. To me comes immediately the concept of culture. So I would like to have from you more insight also on this aspect, because I think I feel like this is something that resonates. If you have to cooperate together, you need the culture that fosters this cooperation. So I wanted to hear really your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an important point. You know, I find that certainly in the English-speaking Caribbean, we have a lot in common, an awful lot in common. And I find it as easy to do business in Trinidad, Barbados, and Jamaica. There's very little difference. It's the same law. A lot of people have gone to the University of the West Indies. People talk about cricket a lot more in Guyana and Trinidad and Barbados than they do in Jamaica nowadays. But we have a lot in common, a lot in common. I think that we have often, partly because of our history and how the independence movements occurred in individual countries, coming out of the labor movement, etc., and trade unions in each country, have a culture of protecting power. And that exists. You can see that in CARICOM, for example, where, if we're honest, it's not a very democratic situation to have an individual who's prime minister of a country of 120,000 having the same vote as the prime minister of Jamaica, who has 3 million people. So, and they have the same vote. But the reality is that I think we have to accept that we have chosen to create and have our own identities, and that's real. And in today's society, people are very serious about how they identify. I mean, in the US, that is a big thing, and we have done that, and we've decided to call ourselves Jamaicans. We've decided to call ourselves Trinidadians. We're St. Lucian, or that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot in common. We have a history in common. We may have sea between us, but we do have a lot in common. We also, though, we do have our individualities. I mean, if you go to St. Lucia and you listen to people talking patois, it's almost like they're talking a completely different language. I mean, in Jamaica they talk patois, but they don't talk like in St. Lucia. I mean, in Jamaica it's talk English patois. It's just like bad English spoken fast. I mean, people are going to be very offended that I said that, but that's the reality. In St. Lucia, it's like a completely different language. So we do have our individual sort of idiosyncrasies. We are different, but I think we can accept our differences. I think what we need to do, though, is really embrace the desire to deliver scale and economies and really simplify our region and make it easier for capital to come in. And that's something that I think we need to do. We have similar problems. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the fact that most of our countries, independent movements and political parties came out of the labor movement means most countries have labor regulations that are probably, if you were to look at them, a little bit onerous on capital. In Jamaica, for example, it's almost impossible to terminate an employee, regardless of what they did. I mean, we've had someone that stabbed a tenant, and they're still on our payroll at the moment because we're going to have to go through an industrial dispute tribunal to get the termination done. And the person that was stabbed didn't file criminal proceedings, you know? So we have those issues also in common. But we have a lot in common. We do have a lot in common, and we have a lot of common problems. But fundamentally, if we do not address productivity and education in our countries and adopt technology, and technology does require scale. You know, you can't just spend $5 million on a small problem. You want to spend $5 million that you can leverage it across multiple transactions and reduce the cost of it and reduce the cost of implementation. So I think we have a lot to be gained by embracing the commonalities we have and striving for those benefits. But you know, there are massive cultural differences in almost every country that exists. I mean, you have North Italy, South Italy, you have Welsh people, you have English people, you have Scottish people, you have Northern English people, you have Southern English people, you have people from London that think they're different from everyone else, you have people in Florida who during COVID didn't think it existed. I mean, Florida functioned, and you go to Massachusetts, and it was like two different countries, but they're the same country, you know? So I think it exists, but we have to want to be better off and make changes where we can.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, PB, as you said, you like everyone to call you. And I've set you up for a very interesting after-lecture experience because it is open season and you'll be taking questions. And I know our audience is bustling, but we are almost out of time. But you never put on a function like this without tremendous effort from several individuals across the board. And each individual person has to be thanked. And it was a job that needed efficiency, and so we have asked our Director of Economics, Mr. Ian Durant, to perform that task, and I trust he will mention every single name.
Thank you, Camille, for setting me up just like you did our guest. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The task of acknowledging all participants of this memorial lecture falls on me tonight. Now, as we conclude one of the marquee events of the bank's 54th annual meeting, we extend sincere appreciation to the government and people of Canada for the hospitality extended to us. We are grateful to you for not only hosting the annual meeting, but the unwavering support provided to ensure a successful event. To P.B. Scott, our lecturer and self-proclaimed frustrated regionalist, sincerest thanks to you. You said a lot of things that are very close to my heart, so I really enjoyed the lecture. Now, as an organization, CDB is cognizant of the need to create healthy ecosystems for production and trade if our countries are going to grow in a sustained and inclusive manner. In this regard, your specific examples were highly valuable in pointing to how we can improve these ecosystems. More generally, however, from your insightful remarks, I gleaned an exhortation for us to advance the process of regional integration. You argue that if we make full use of the scale provided by the regional market, including through the harmonization of our regulatory frameworks, then we can realize the full economic potential of our region. You delivered an impactful lecture and have added to the substantial body of work of these lectures and the inspiring legacy of our former president, William G. Demas. The spirit of William Demas advances because of your thought-provoking contribution. Thank you for offering your time and sharing so vividly your unique perspectives and experiences in this region, and arguing convincingly that we can in fact overcome our diseconomies and inefficiencies and accelerate our development. The passion with which you delivered your messages are evidence that the leaders in the private sector in the region are invested in regional integration, and that the private sector wants to be part of the solution to any challenges that we face. I am hopeful that we can build on that. To our Chief Strategy and Accountability Officer and P.B. Scott's compatriot, Ms. Onika Miller, thank you for contributing to this journey to simplicate and not complicate the region by setting the context and introducing our featured speaker. To Camille Taylor, our host, we appreciate your guidance, weaving continuity in what has been an interactive and enriching program. To those joining us here in Canada and online, we are grateful for your time and the high level of engagement and attention demonstrated this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all. I now turn it back over to Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Ian. So as we draw this remarkable evening to a close, let's reflect on the little journey we have taken together. We met the who, that's us, a distinguished array of leaders, thinkers, and doers. We've delved into the what, which is a rich legacy of William G. Demas, and this lecture series that is a beacon of intellectual brilliance and has been so for 2 decades. We've unraveled the why, and that's our unwavering commitment to fostering development and progress across our beloved Caribbean. Now, as for the how, it's by coming together, sharing ideas, and continuing the legacy of visionary leaders like William G. Demas, but also learning from the ingenuity and experience of trailblazers like P.B. Scott. Thank you all for your presence and your engagement and shared dedication. Let's carry forward the wisdom and inspiration we've gained tonight and continue to make waves in our region and beyond. Good night and safe travels.